You know when you're watching a movie and you see something so cool, you think, man, I wish that was real. We've all been there. But what happens when someone with that childhood dream also has the engineering chops to actually build it? Well, today we're diving into the incredible story of turning one of the most iconic fantasy objects ever, Aladdin's magic carpet, into a real-life flying machine.
I mean, it's a fantasy that just grabs you, right? The idea of soaring through the sky on nothing but a rug. No wings, no visible engines, just magic. But for one creator, that question wasn't just a daydream. It was a challenge. It was a blueprint for an impossible project.
And right here, this is where our story really begins. Not in some high-tech lab, but with a simple childhood memory. The person behind this whole project was driven by this lifelong desire to see Aladdin's carpet fly in the real world. So this wasn't just an engineering problem to be solved. It was about making a dream take flight, literally.
So how in the world do you engineer magic? Well, you start by breaking it down into physics and aerodynamics. The first and honestly the biggest challenge was figuring out how to make a flat, totally unaerodynamic object lift off the ground and fly with any kind of stability.
Okay, so your first thought might be, just make it a giant drone, right? Slap 4 propellers on the corners. But here's the thing. That would never work. A drone pushes air down to create lift. With a solid carpet surface, the air pressure from above would just push right back, creating this massive drag. The carpet would basically be glued to the ground by physics.
So the drone idea was a non-starter. The creator had to pivot to a design that's actually more like a traditional airplane. The plan became this. Use 2 super powerful motors at the back for forward thrust, and then use control flaps at the front to steer it, just like the flaps on an airplane's wing. This way, it would cut through the air instead of just trying to push off of it.
All right, with the big idea figured out, it was time to actually build the thing. This meant finding materials that were both incredibly light but also strong enough to hold the whole setup together. So let's take a look at exactly what went into making this carpet fly.
Here are the guts of the operation. The base was made from 3 sheets of this super lightweight but rigid styrofoam, the kind you'd see in RC airplanes, and it was reinforced with an aluminum rod to keep it from snapping. For power, 2 brushless motors, each kicking out about 900 grams of thrust, and to run everything, 2 beefy batteries and a flight controller, which is basically the brains of the entire system.
Now this is absolutely crucial. A flying carpet has no rudder, no tail, no elevator, none of the usual stuff that helps a plane steer. That's why that little flight controller, working with 2 simple control flaps up front, is so critical. They are the only things that will give the pilot any ability to guide this thing through the air.
And, of course, it's not a magic carpet if it doesn't look like one, right? The final step of the build was all about aesthetics, but it was absolutely essential, finding the perfect, ornate rug to stretch over that foam frame. This is where the engineering and the fantasy really came together. It had to fly right, but just as importantly, it had to look right.
But here's the thing. Building the dream is one part of the equation. Making it actually fly is a whole different beast. Success was not immediate, not even close. The project immediately slammed into a series of frustrating failures that almost ended the whole thing. This was a 4-day ordeal of trial, error, and constant, non-stop problem solving.
Day 1. Spirits are high, right? The carpet's all put together, everything's hooked up. It's time for the very first test, just a simple glide test, to see if the basic concept even has a chance of working.
And it's a failure. On the very first gentle toss, it just nosedives and snaps a propeller. A small setback, sure, but what a frustrating start. It was a pretty clear sign that this was going to be way, way harder than it looked.
All right, on to day 2. The propeller is replaced, and it's time for another shot. But this time, a much more fundamental problem showed up the second the motors spooled up.
The carpet was completely unstable. The issue was the center of gravity, or CG. The balance was just all wrong. With those heavy batteries in the back, it was way too tail-heavy, and it would just try to flip over instead of flying forward. For anything to fly, that CG has to be perfect.
So this led to this painstaking process of recalibration. And the solution? Move the heaviest parts, the batteries, as far forward as they could possibly go to counteract the weight of the motors in the back. It was a total process of trial and error. Move them, test it. Move them again, test it again, until that balance finally felt right.
Just as the balance issue was getting sorted, another huge flaw popped up. Both motors were spinning in the same direction. Now, this creates a powerful rotational force. It's called torque, that was causing the entire carpet to want to violently roll over on itself the second it tried to take off.
The fix for this was actually simple and pretty brilliant. By using two different kinds of propellers, one made to spin clockwise and the other counterclockwise, those rotational forces just cancel each other out. This creates stable, neutral thrust, and it's a basic principle you see in any twin-engine aircraft.
So after 4 long days of broken parts, bad physics, and constant tweaks, the moment of truth had finally arrived. The balance was corrected, the motor torque was neutralized, the weather was looking good. It was time. Time to see if the dream could finally actually take flight.
I mean, everything was on the line here. All that work, all the frustration, all the problem solving, it all came down to this one single moment. Was it going to nosedive into the dirt again, or was it finally going to soar?
And it flew. It actually flew. It lifted into the air and just glided smoothly, banking and turning, looking for all the world like a real-life magic carpet. The design worked, the controls worked. After all those failures, it was a moment of just pure, absolute triumph.
That successful flight, even though it was brief, was so much more than just a successful test. It was the culmination of a childhood dream, brought to life through sheer persistence, clever ingenuity, and just a stubborn refusal to give up.
Now, the flight didn't end with some perfect, graceful landing. It eventually came down and crashed into a field, breaking a few parts. But you know what? That didn't matter one bit. The goal was never to create a commercial product. The goal was to prove it could be done. The mission was to make the carpet fly, and in that, it was a spectacular success.
And this final quote from the creator just says it all, doesn't it? It's that perfect, triumphant response to all the doubt, whether that was from other people or just in his own head. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest barrier to the impossible isn't physics, it's just finding the courage to make a dream take flight.